Jews, Christians, and Muslims have different gods through their understanding of substance and essence. So why do I say this? The Muslims will say it's corrupt, but assume they reconstruct their own version of it by how they interpret what it should be. Let's say the Muslims had a Torah and have their Quran, and we have the Jewish Torah, which is part of the Old Testament, which is part of the Tanakh, as the Jews call it, and the Christians also have the Torah, or as a whole, the Old Testament, which the whole thing is called Tanakh. The difference is that they worship God differently. The Christians have a triune God, which is a God of three persons in one essence, or three essences of one person. It depends on if you have a lowercase o Orthodox Trinitarianism or a tripartite Trinitarianism. The Muslims believe in Tawhid, and the Jews just call him the unity. The information of how they interpret the Torah would be substituted by their later revelations. The Christians have the Gospel. The Muslims have the Quran, and the Jews have the Talmud, which is not necessarily scripture to them, but it is considered holy enough secondary to them. The Talmud explicitly rejects Trinitarianism and sees God as a outside force of essence. I hope I said that correctly. I don't want to strawman the Jewish worldview. The Christians see it as one person through the three essences, which is when you have a different conclusion, a different substance to that, you have a different God. And the Quran outright just says no Trinity. And they come close to the Jewish God. That said, the Muslim view of God is that he stays outside of creation without interaction, only angelic intercession. The Jews will accept that God can sometimes enter creation in person. Say Ezekiel. The Christians will just say God is in creation. They just say it, God's in creation. So the Jewish God is distant but close personally. The Muslim God is distant and both in essence and in person. Doesn't really interact with his creation. The Christians interpret God as close in creation itself and interactive within creation. So the conclusions of God has different substances due to their understanding of the essences differently. The essence of God therefore has different gods. I cannot say with good conscience that Muslims, Jews, and Christians worship the same God when you have a completely different conclusion. Now, people would say, what is the Trinitarians' view if the Jews were not Trinitarian? That's not necessarily true. There were Jews who studied Hermeticism. They loved hermeneutics with Aristotelian philosophy. So Philo of Alexandria, for example, was a Jew. He was a 2nd century philosopher who thought there was Trinity. He didn't use the word Trinity, but words are descriptions to observations. What's the word? Prescriptions. When something is talked about, you have to make a conclusion. For example, the omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence is never described, but when observed, you have to describe it. You have to find a term of what is reported. There were 2nd century BC Jews who therefore had semi-Trinitarian observations. Example, when God speaks in plurality and have three essences. A spirit of Yahweh, which is informative. A person of Yahweh, which is interactive. And the divine Yahweh, which would be a observationalist, so to speak. Which Christians expanded upon. Whether you believe in Trinity or not, to have the Christian worldview, I would say the Trinity is a later revelation. And if I was an atheist, I would say the Trinity is just doctrine from Greek philosophy placed into essences. So when you have that view, you naturally have a different God from the Islamic God, who is distant and not interactive to Earth. Whereas the Jewish understanding of God is somewhat interactive to Earth, but still distant. To creation, rather. The Trinitarian God is always close. For example, whenever you hear the word angel of the Lord with a uppercase A, they would say that's not a angel, but the angel, which they would interpret as an essence of Christ. One people would say, how can Trinity be true? God's a human. That doesn't make sense. The answer is a term that the Hindus call avatar. I'm not saying Christians are Hindus, I'm saying they have that concept. A omnipresent God who's omnipotent with a concentrated spirit of God manifesting. Let me basically put it simple. The word manifestation exists. The word avatar exists. The word incarnation exists. A piece of God can naturally form into a concentrated presence of a location. If that means a spirit of God inhabits the human body of flesh as a vessel that contains the Spirit of God, that's Jesus, as a Christian would say it. A Jewish would say that can't be possible because God is so holy, wouldn't that body burst into flames? That depends on if God decrees that it would burst into flames or not, naturally. And a Muslim, he would probably just say what the Jews said. That Spirit of God would have just burned that vessel to flames. Because something is so holy. But again, unless God decrees otherwise, it possibly is not possible like that. So that's why, in conclusion, you have to say that they are different gods. When you interpret the early revelations by the information of your newer revelations, you have that conclusion. Islam is just Torah plus Quran. Judaism is Torah plus Talmud, and Christianity is Torah plus Gospel. So your interpretations will differ by what informs you. Now, me personally, go on any comic section, Quora section, you'll see there throughout the years I've changed religion. I'm a Christian now, but I've flirted with other religions before. I've flirted with the Lebanese religion, I've flirted with the Norse religion, and I flirted with the Arab religion. And while I never formally converted to any of them, I drew my conclusions of, no, I'm just going to be a Christian. I'm sure if you go back in my early posts on some websites, you'd be like, wow, this is his religious views? My religious views always are changing. But me, I love religion, so I keep studying. But understanding the nature of God, you have different theological substance when your conclusions of that essence is different. So I cannot say that Jews and Christians, for example, worship the same God. You just can't. Because whether you believe that there are Trinitarian Jews or not, and there were, Philo's an example, the Jews reject Trinity. So you cannot have that conclusion. Now, there is a sect of Jews that go beyond Trinitarian. They're called the Kabbalah, and they have like 72 emanations of 13 figments of one God called the Sephirot. And I'm like, okay, that's crazy, even for a Trinitarian. So, I mean, other than the Kabbalah Jews, who are just weird, and I found it very interesting. I actually tried to look for a Kabbalistic book called the Zohar, but I never found one that was in English, so I never read it. But I thought it was interesting how I find it funny that Jews will criticize Christians for being Trinitarian, yet a sect of Judaism called the Kabbalah, which are not really a sect, or more of a mysticism, have the Sephirot understanding of God, and I just find it funny that they have 72 emanations of one God. One person, 72 essences. What the heck? It's kind of funny, actually. It's like, that's not the same God as the God I worship. But they do believe in incarnation, so that's fair. Still funny, though.